Evangelion is one of my very favorite anime of all time, so whenever I see interesting figures, I typically like to pick them up. Today's figure is a recent release from Bandai in the Robot Damashii line. The Robot Damashii line is awesome, and I have a couple of these figures already. So, joining the Robot Spirits is Evangelion Unit 0, the prototype Eva. This is an Evangelion that I feel gets overlooked a bit because of all of the attention that gets given to Evangelion Units 1 and 2. And while I do love them, it's nice to finally see something else. Previously, Eva Unit 0 was hard to get because it was released as a web exclusive through the Robot Spirits website. This exclusivity saw the figure reaching incredibly high prices on the secondhand market thanks to scalpers. As a result, I never picked one up because I wasn't going to pay $200 for a $50 figure. Now this one is more reminiscent of Eva Unit 0 from the Rebuild series of Evangelion, which is fine because the mechs keep their design through and through, with just some minor tweaks here and there. But with that, let's stop talking and get into this, because I am rather excited to get this figure opened. And if you know anything about the Robot Spirits line, you'll understand that they typically come really well equipped with a lot of great accessories, as well as just wonderful articulation. In the blister here, we can see an awesome minigun, a rifle, a blade, and plenty of hands and other stuff here as well. And here we are, right out of the packaging. This figure looks incredible. Very bright, very vibrant, but very clean. I should mention that this figure from foot to head measures just about 6.5 inches, though with the shoulder pad, it's closer to 7, but still, I would say 6.5 is probably about fair for the measurement. Sometimes the problem with a bright yellow like this is that it can come off a bit cheap, but I will say that the Robot Damashii line typically does a great job with the plastics they use. Rather than being super glossy, it's somewhat muted thanks to the fact that it's a bit more matted. And again, that's because they're using incredibly high quality pieces here. Though I will say I'm seeing some deviation in form. Right off the bat, I can see some differing values of yellow in here, whereas we get somewhat of a macaroni and cheese look for these pieces by the shoulders, whereas the rest of it's a muted yellow, and then these two pieces on the head and then the back plate where the entry plug might go are a little bit brighter. I don't know what's on this thing, but it seems like there's some black smudges, and I'm pretty sure my hands are clean here. Regardless, overall, the actual way this thing is put together is wonderful. You can see that there's differing plates in the middle where there's tons of joints, little tiny balls inside of it with pegs that allow it to go up and down at each piece. So this thing is layered, it's chunky, and it's mechanical looking, which is great because it really does give off a wonderful aesthetic. And I'm no stranger to this. I actually have Eva 2 right here, and I even have Eva Unit 1 over on the shelf. But yeah, I would say that everything here looks just about as good as I would expect it to. All the joints feel incredibly responsive, so let's get into the posability. Now there's a lot of moving parts, so this might be a little bit of a longer articulation piece here. Let's begin with the head, because I will say right off the bat, this is impressive. This thing is on a ball peg joint firstly, which can go up and down and roll around. That actually may be a ball joint inside of there. Either way, this thing has wonderful mobility. There's multiple joints, one in the head and then one in the neck itself. Whereas the neck is definitely on a ball, which is then on a pegged hinge, so this thing can go in and out, and it can even come outward as well. This thing is incredibly well articulated at the head. I could see that for Eva Unit 1 because it does the berserk pose, but this doesn't really need that. Eva 0 is far less articulated, or I guess it doesn't really do as much crazy stuff in the show. Still, I can't act like I'm not happy for that. Now they have changed the way that the shoulder pads are going on because originally, I can show you right here, the shoulder pads were attached very flimsy through a tiny ball joint that plugged in right here at the shoulder, which you can actually take that off rather easily. It did what it needed to. You could pose it well enough with that, but these things were kind of flimsy and they would fall off pretty often. These ones are attached at the back though, and it seems to be similar. I'm gonna try here. And again, it is a ball joint and it plugs into the back though via a much larger little socket there, which is helpful. It seems much tighter too, so I will say that that's nice, though I'm not sure in practice how much better this will pose because it doesn't seem to have as much up and down as it does just kind of going side to side. You can also do this too, so, you know. Now the shoulder is very interestingly a ball joint, which seems to also have some sort of hinge there too, because this thing can move quite a bit. Now the shoulder's actual connection there is a hinge, which can only go up and down, but there's so much more with the rotation where it connects to the chest. And then of course you can even swivel the bicep. So there's so much you can do up here. Now the elbow is similarly a hinge, which can go up and down, but then you do have a peg in there, so that allows for some in and out as well. The wrist is a ball peg hinge, so that allows it to go up and down and roll around and spin at either side where it connects, which also allows for them to swap out rather easily because it's just a simple ball that plugs in. Now, one thing I really love about the Robot Spirits line of Eva is that they are incredibly well segmented here at the chest and abdominal area, which allows for amazing figure accuracy to the actual show model, but also these all hide ball joints that allow for amazing posability. Each one can be moved around freely. You can swivel them just a bit. Whoopsie. But in addition to them having even just the slightest bit of side to side, they have an amazing ability to go downward and up as well. So that allows for some great posability there. It doesn't quite go as far back, but that's okay because combined with the legs, you can do just as much as you need to there. The result is a great range of expression for this character. Moving on to the legs, we have a simpler ball joint here connecting the top portion of the leg. Really not much else to say other than it's a ball joint, so it goes pretty good up and down and side to side, swivels rather well, and you can twist it pretty much any way you need to. The knee is a double point hinge, which allows for great bending. You can put the leg all the way back against itself, which is wonderful. Something peculiar is that you can actually take the little extension of the knee and bend that forward and backward as well, so I guess that's a nice little added bit of articulation there. And finally, the ankle is on a pegged hinge, which allows it to go up and down, but also you can swivel it side to side. And additionally, you have a nice hinge there for the toe tip, which can bend upward. And this little bit of armor right here is also on a small ball joint, which allows for just enough rotation and movement to make it not awkward when you are posing the foot. Overall, wonderful posability. Really nothing that I can complain about here. I would say maybe the legs are a little limited, but they do what they need to, so I can't complain. Now, of course, we have to talk about accessories because this does come with quite a bit. But let's talk hands because, of course, these things have accessories to hold, so why wouldn't they give them some extra hands? The default hands it comes with are a pair of opened hands, which the fingers are actually somewhat bent on. But it comes with a pair of fists as well, which are useful if you want to make your Evas punch each other, even though there's no angels for them to punch since they don't make figures of those, but that's another topic for another time. We also get these interesting open hands where the fingers are curled and the thumb's pointing back. I guess you could use these sort of like a grip on maybe the guns. But either way, they're interesting. They can be used for a variety of things. Potentially most hilarious are these karate chop hands, the flat hand. They may seem slightly useless, but I guess you could make them chop or a variety of other things with them. I think they're pretty funny. A really nice pair of open hands as well, with the fingers spread nice and wide, so it could signify that it wants a $5 footlong for lunch. And finally, we get a pair of these gripping hands, which are useful, of course, for holding the other accessories that we're going to transition to now. One such accessory being this here progressive knife, which looks decent enough, I guess. It's a bit of an older design. It's a pretty traditional knife, and there's some red accent there. It's a decent little accessory, nothing that I can complain too much about, and it seems simple enough to put it in their hand. Now that's a knife. Thankfully, the hands are decently flexible. That plastic is a little bit lighter, which is nice because you can get the accessories into the hands without too much trouble, and you don't have to worry about breaking them, and over time, they won't be too problematic because that flexible plastic will kind of bend with heat and stuff like that. But we also get this rifle, which is pretty standard issue stuff here. Very familiar to some of the other accessories we've gotten with the other Eva figures. And yeah, another simple accessory that just plugs right into the hand. If you know anything about Evangelion, you'll understand that the guns are absolutely useless against an AT field, but it is nice for them to include them anyway. And finally, the potential best accessory so far is going to be this amazing Gatling gun. It's just your standard issue minigun here. Great because the barrel actually does rotate, which is a nice feature. I don't think it's really that necessary, but it does just make this a bit more playable, which of course is fun to a man-child like myself. So, Really nice looking, great details, actually lots of nice heft to it. And yeah, this is just another one where you can plug right in right here. Good thing about this accessory is that it's light enough for them to hold it in hand without it being too cumbersome for the posability. It is a little large, so you do have to kind of think about the way you're going to bend the arms, but it's completely manageable, which I do appreciate. And I didn't notice this at first glance, but for some reason this little piece is also rotatable, so I guess that's just even more points for the articulation there. First, let's take a look at the shoulder here. We can see this little emblem painted on there decently enough, but check this out. So you can actually remove this shoulder pad and attach this more powered down version, I guess, because the same emblem is no longer there. I'm not quite sure what this implies. I'm assuming this has something to do with what happens in the final movie, but as you can see, it actually removes your ability to attach the fins here, so that's pretty cool. But in addition to that, you can also remove you could hardly tell, though, you can also remove this part of the leg. And similarly, you have an additional part that you can just swap out right there. Again, I really don't know what this is implying, but it is an additional piece which changes the figure's look quite a bit. But that's not all, because you can also take off the chest plate too. And once your poor Eva Zero is bearing it all to the world, you could then attach this additional chest plate here. It may not seem like it, but I think it's just different enough to be pretty cool as an accessory. These are no longer indented, they're actually physically there, as well as this line has moved to a different place. Pretty cool. Now on this particular form, it also implies on the box that I use these strange handcuffs on the Eva unit. Why do we have handcuffs for an Eva unit, and how the hell would they even work? The detail on these things are okay. I mean, they're really stiff, just a very simple piece of plastic. And I would be really scared to break these. There's no flex whatsoever. These are rock solid. They feel kind of cheap, to be honest. I guess you have to pop off one of the hands to actually put it on the wrist that you want to. And there you go. Go to jail, Ray. And while I want to show you what that's intended for, I want to hold it because there's one other accessory that goes with this form. And that accessory is this strange cross antenna. I'm assuming that's what it is because of where it goes. And to me, it does seem like it could just be an antenna, but knowing Evangelion, this is of course a cross shape for a reason. This is all it is, it's just a simple little peg here. What you're meant to do is open up the back of the Eva. You then plug this portion into the back where you've just hollowed it out. And now with its back opened up, you can go ahead and plug in this piece here. Be careful though, because this part is incredibly thick, which is hard to plug in, while this is incredibly thin and you could snap it very easily. So there we go, we're all plugged in and ready for church. And there you have it. Nearly impossible to pull off, but this is the Evangelion Unit 0 in somewhat of a dead state. Its wrists both locked in the cuffs, the antenna giving out the beacon of maybe having someone come to retrieve it, or who knows what this could imply. I do rather like the idea, but unfortunately the execution is incredibly difficult. It took me quite a while to get it into this pose, and that's mainly because of those handcuffs. They are so stiff that you really can't do anything with it, and trying to crisscross the arms in a way that looks like what's on the box is really difficult thanks to those cuffs. I was able to get it like this, which I think is decent enough, and it does look cool, but I don't think I am ever going to pose it this way, ever again. And this is one of those accessories that I feel like are nice and they're interesting and they're a great inclusion, I guess, to make it more accurate to whatever the movie might have for us. But personally, I just don't think it's necessary. I feel like I could have gone with something more reminiscent of the N2 missile or something like that. So one serious complaint that I have is the fact that since you can remove the armor in the shoulder here, it creates this terrible gap between the bicep and where this top plate of the armor is. It just looks really bad and I can't get it to go away. You can get it to kind of get close, but the one arm seems a lot better than the other, but man, this is just really, really gappy. Some people might think that that's negligible and all, but that, like, I can see right through it. That's terrible. It's a really poor design choice, and for an accessory that really wasn't that necessary, like I said, I could go without these things being swappable, and I would be so much happier, especially because then there wouldn't be these terrible gaps on the figure. And finally, the umbilical cord. This piece is meant to plug into the back of the Eva, and the other end of it can actually plug into a robot spirit's base, evidently. I don't have a Robot Spirits base, but this is an included accessory that I guess is appreciated. It adds a bit more immersion, but I don't think I'll ever be posing it with this. What's cool though is that there is a wire in here, and you can bend it however you might like. And it very simply just plugs into the back of the Eva. I will say though that this could help with some added stability should you want to pose it in certain poses, and maybe use this as sort of a counterweight. And last but not least, there is a small piece here that can attach to a Robot Spirits stand, of course, which would attach to one of the bases. Again, I don't have one, so I can't really show you what it would do, but basically, it just plugs in right here and clips onto the bottom of the Eva. With that now clipped on, you can of course put it on there and put it in all sorts of crazy, even mid-air poses, while this just holds it up from the stand. So then, my final thoughts on this figure. I like this figure, it's pretty nice. I'm a big fan of the Robot Spirits line, so I knew coming into this that I would enjoy it, but maybe that adoration for the brand kind of made my expectations a bit too high. While I can't find a ton wrong with it, I can't find enough that's overwhelmingly amazing. Does that make sense? I guess I should say that I like it, but I don't love it. While the articulation is wonderful, the overall presentation is amazing, the colors are spot on, and even some smaller details such as the clear plastic used on the head, really everything about this is positive, but there's really just not enough wow factor to it that's making me really want to recommend it. I'll go as far as to say I'd absolutely recommend picking up this figure, especially if you don't have a Unit 0 from the Damashii line, but I don't think this is better than the original. Like I said, those extra cosmetic bits that you can swap out really weren't that pivotal for me. I much preferred the giant missile that the original release came with, but I know that they can't do the same thing twice. So unless that scene is really iconic in the movie, I don't really think the antenna cross and the handcuffs and all of those cosmetic swap out parts that you can use are really enough to make me say that this is the definitive Unit 0 figure to get. Considering the fact that this figure is anywhere from $50 to $60, I'd say it's still a solid release. Bandai's Robot Spirits line is hardly matched by any other mech figures, so I will say that this is one of the best figures you can get of this. Though I will say the upcoming real grade release of this has yet to prove whether or not it will be the definitive version of Unit 0. In the final parts of the review, I typically do a ton of poses and have to film them for a few seconds apiece, and normally I don't like that part, but I will say that with this figure it was incredibly easy. This figure's posability is not to be understated, it is absolutely amazing to pose. This thing is really easy to play with. I found myself getting a little carried away at times, so for that reason alone I'd say it definitely gets an extra point and a lot of love for that. I can't overstate how annoying it is sometimes to pose certain figures, so this has a lot going in that regard. But I'm just missing something that's making me really go, yeah, that was awesome. I'm so glad I bought that figure. Some of the new design is preferred. I do like the ability to move the knees a bit because they weren't able to do that before. And while I think the shoulder pads are a bit cumbersome, I will say that their placement behind the arm is actually just a little bit better than those original ones. So for that, they won't get any negative points there. Compared to the rest of the line, I'll actually say that this one stands out quite a bit more and looks a bit better than my previous Robot Damashii figures from the Eva series. So with all that, I'm going to give the Robot Spirits Evangelion Unit 0 a solid 7 out of 10. It's a really strong 7. It's almost an 8, but again, there's just really nothing that's making me stare at this thing with wide open eyes, amazed at how great it is. But what do you guys think? Is this figure awesome? Did you buy it? Are you going to buy any of the other figures in the Robot Spirits line for Evangelion? What about this ugly thing? Have you ever noticed how Eva Unit 0's head kinda looks like Pen Pen in a way? Maybe that's just me, I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments section below and like the video if you did indeed like it. I'm gonna link some videos on screen for you to check out, so even if you've seen them, make sure to check it out, and that does help the channel. But with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching, have an amazing day, and keep on collecting.